My name's John. I'm 35, married, and a father of two little ones, a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old. Life, as you can imagine, is hectic. Between diaper changes, sleepless nights, and work, I barely have time to breathe. I can't remember the last time I did something just for me. So, when my friend Mike announced his bachelor party trip to Lake Tahoe, I jumped at the chance. The trip was planned months ago, and I booked my flight 4 months in advance. It wasn't just a bachelor party. It was also a rare guy's getaway. A bunch of old friends, a few days to unwind, maybe gamble a little, share some laughs and have some beers. Just a chance to feel like myself again, even if only for 3 nights. The timing wasn't perfect. Taking time off work is tough, especially since I used up most of my vacation days when my youngest was born. But I figured I could borrow a little future PTO and make it work. My wife was supportive, understanding how important this was to me. Fast forward to now. The trip is almost here and I'm counting down the days. I imagine sitting at a blackjack table, sipping a cold beer, laughing with the guys. For the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited. But then, last week, the tone of the trip shifted. We learned some big news. Mike's fiancée Sarah is 3 months pregnant. Of course, we were all thrilled for them. But with that announcement came a request I hadn't anticipated, one that has thrown the entire group into a spiral of tension and second-guessing. Last week, during one of our group chats about the trip, Mike dropped the news. Sarah is 3 months pregnant. The announcement caught everyone off guard, but was met with genuine excitement and congratulations. It's not every day you hear that your best friend is going to be a dad. As the congratulations settled, the conversation shifted. Mike explained how much this pregnancy meant to him and Sarah, how they were planning their lives around it. Then came the surprising part. He mentioned that, out of solidarity with Sarah, he had stopped drinking entirely. It didn't seem like a big deal at first. Mike said he wanted to stay sober, which was totally fine. It's his choice and nobody questioned it. But then Tom, our best man and self-appointed trip organizer, chimed in. Tom announced that out of respect for Mike and Sarah and the situation they're in, he thought the entire group should stay sober for the bachelor party. There was a long pause in the chat after that. Someone threw in a thumbs-up emoji. Another person said they were fine with it, but I sat there staring at the screen feeling a mix of confusion and frustration. The bachelor party was supposed to be about celebrating Mike's last hurrah before the wedding, a chance to kick back and enjoy a few carefree days. The idea of no drinking at all on a trip like this felt off. Don't get me wrong, I understood where Mike and Tom were coming from, but this wasn't just a one-night dinner or a casual get-together. It was a 3-day trip I had invested a lot of time and money into. I typed out a response, trying to keep it measured. Congrats again, Mike, and I totally support your choice to stay sober, but I've been looking forward to this trip for months, and I'm planning to enjoy it my way. I'm still going to drink. That single message opened the floodgates. What followed was a heated discussion that left the group divided, and me questioning whether I'd made a huge mistake. As the group chat exploded, I felt a knot in my stomach. I wasn't trying to cause drama, but I also couldn't backtrack on what I said. For months I'd been looking forward to this trip, not just as a celebration of Mike, but as a break from the chaos of my everyday life. I explained my perspective as calmly as I could. Look, I respect Mike's decision to stay sober. This is a huge moment in his life and I'm genuinely happy for him, but for me this trip is also a chance to relax and have some fun. I'm not talking about going wild or making anyone uncomfortable. I just want to sit at a blackjack table, crack open a beer, and enjoy myself. The response was mixed. A few of the guys agreed with me outright. It's not like we're forcing Mike to drink, one friend, Jake, chimed in. Another said, we've all spent a lot of money on this trip. Everyone should get to enjoy it how they want. But then there was Tom, as vocal as ever. This trip isn't about you, John, he fired back. It's about Mike. If you can't make one small sacrifice for your friend, what does that say about you? I countered, it's not just a small sacrifice. I've spent a lot of money on this trip, taken time off I don't really have, and organized my life around these 3 days. I'm happy to dedicate time to Mike, but I also need this break for myself. I even offered to stay sober for a day and night, but apparently that's not good enough. The tension in the group chat was palpable. Every message felt like it carried more weight than the last. Some friends stayed silent, probably trying to avoid taking sides, while others argued for hours. At that moment, I didn't know if I was being selfish or if everyone else was just being unreasonable. All I knew was that I wasn't willing to give up the one thing I'd been looking forward to for months. The group chat had become a battlefield, with opinions flying in every direction. I quickly realized that our friends were splitting into 3 distinct camps. First, there were those who sided with me, Jake and a few others who agreed that everyone should enjoy the trip in their own way. "It's not like we're crashing a baby shower," Jake joked, trying to lighten the mood. These guys understood where I was coming from and felt that the no drinking rule was unnecessary. Then there were the neutrals, the ones who stayed quiet or threw in the occasional, "I see both sides." They didn't want to get involved, probably hoping this whole argument would blow over. And finally, there were the ones backing Tom and Mike. Tom, of course, was the loudest voice in this group. "If we can't rally around Mike for one weekend, what's the point of even going?" he argued. A few others chimed in with messages like, "It's Mike's weekend, not ours," and "We can drink any other time. This trip is special." At some point, it became less about drinking and more about loyalty. Tom started throwing words like selfish and disrespectful my way, which hit harder than I expected. I wasn't trying to make this about me, but I also didn't think asking for some personal enjoyment was out of line. The conversation left a bad taste in my mouth. The trip hadn't even started yet, and the tension was already thick enough to cut with a knife. I wondered if the dynamics of our group could ever go back to the way they were. For now, though, all I could do was stick to my guns and hope that once we got to Tahoe, things would smooth over. After the heated group chat, I spent a lot of time thinking about everything that had been said. Was I really being selfish? Was I out of line for wanting to enjoy the trip my way? I kept coming back to the same point. I had invested too much in this trip to feel like I couldn't fully enjoy it. Flights, accommodations, and borrowed PTO weren't cheap or easy for me, especially with 2 young kids at home. Every time I thought about the logistics of making this trip work, I felt more justified in my stance. This wasn't just about a beer or 2. It was about the principle of the thing. I needed this trip as much as Mike needed our support. Parenthood had consumed every inch of my life, and this was one of the few opportunities I had to step away and breathe. The idea of spending 3 sober nights watching everyone tiptoe around Mike's decision just didn't sit right with me. To be clear, it wasn't that I had an issue with Mike staying sober. I respected his choice and even admired his commitment to Sarah. But the expectation that everyone else should do the same felt unfair, especially since this wasn't something Mike had communicated earlier. If he had told us months ago, maybe I'd have made different plans. I even tried to find a middle ground. I proposed staying sober for an entire day and night of the trip, dedicating that time to activities Mike would enjoy without alcohol involved. But Tom immediately shot it down, saying, "If you're not all in, it's not real support." That line stuck with me. Wasn't compromise a part of friendship too? I wasn't trying to disrespect Mike or make this about me. I just wanted to feel like I wasn't giving up something I had been looking forward to for so long. The more I thought about it, the more I stood by my decision. Still, the accusations of selfishness lingered in the back of my mind, leaving me uneasy about how things would play out. Tom didn't waste any time doubling down on his stance. In a separate message to the group, he laid out his reasoning, framing it as a matter of loyalty and respect. "This trip isn't just some random guy's weekend," he said. "It's about Mike, about showing him that we're here for him during one of the biggest transitions of his life. He's stepping up to be a dad, and the least we can do is step up for him. If he's not drinking, we shouldn't either. It's about solidarity." I'll admit, Tom's argument wasn't without merit. He painted a picture of unity, of everyone coming together to support Mike. It sounded noble, but it also felt overly rigid. Tom didn't stop there. He started calling me out directly, accusing me of being more focused on myself than on the reason for the trip. "If you can't make this one sacrifice, John, then maybe you need to rethink what it means to be a good friend," he said in the group chat. His words stung more than I'd like to admit, I didn't see myself as a bad friend, but Tom's comments made me feel like I was being put on trial. I tried to respond calmly, reiterating my offer to stay sober for part of the trip, and pointing out that it was possible for everyone to enjoy the weekend in their own way. Tom wasn't having it. "You're either with us or you're not," he said. His black and white approach left little room for nuance, and I could see some of the quieter members of the group starting to lean toward his side. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about drinking anymore. It was about control, about how the trip should be defined and who had the right to define it. After the group chat turned into a standoff, a few friends reached out to me privately. Their messages gave me a little insight into where everyone's heads were at. Jake, who had supported me in the group chat, was the first to call. "Man, I get it," he said. "You've been looking forward to this trip as much as anyone. Tom's making it sound like we're disrespecting Mike by drinking, but I don't think that's true. We're grown men, we can support Mike and still enjoy ourselves." Jake even suggested we stick to our plans but keep things low-key to avoid any unnecessary drama. On the other hand, Ben, one of the quieter guys, sent me a text that felt more like a plea. "I don't want this trip to turn into a mess before it even starts. Maybe you could just let it go, you know? Keep the peace." I appreciated Ben's honesty, but his suggestion rubbed me the wrong way. Why was the burden of keeping the peace falling on me? Why wasn't anyone asking Tom to compromise? Then came the most surprising message, one from Mike himself. He wasn't as direct as Tom, but his tone was heavy. "Hey, I know this trip means a lot to you and I don't want to make it stressful. This whole no drinking thing wasn't my idea, but I think Tom feels strongly about it because he wants to make the weekend special for me. I hope you guys can work it out." Mike's message threw me off. He wasn't demanding anything, but it was clear he didn't want to step on Tom's toes. That only made me feel more conflicted. Was I standing my ground for the right reasons, or was I making things harder for Mike, who was supposed to be the center of all this? By the end of those conversations, I felt like I was being pulled in every direction. No one wanted to outright say I was wrong, but no one was fully backing me either. It left me feeling isolated and even more uncertain about where I stood. After those conversations, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my mind. Each argument, every message, and even Mike's subtle plea weighed on me. I started questioning myself more deeply than before. Was I being unreasonable? Tom's words, harsh as they were, echoed in my head. Was I really putting my own desires above my friendship with Mike? I thought about what it means to be a good friend, about loyalty and compromise, but then I also thought about everything I'd sacrificed to make this trip happen. My wife Emma had been so understanding, taking on extra responsibilities with the kids just so I could get a few days to recharge. And it wasn't just about me. It was about reconnecting with the group, celebrating Mike, and yes, having a little fun. Was it wrong to want those things? I knew the trip wasn't solely about me, but it wasn't solely about Mike either. We were a group of friends, all with our own lives and challenges. Couldn't there be room for everyone's needs? I thought about the compromises I'd offered, the sober day and night, and how they were rejected outright. That stuck with me. Friendship is supposed to be a two-way street, right? It felt like Tom and a few others were dictating how this weekend should go, and anyone who didn't fall in line was being labeled selfish. Still, doubt crept in. Was my insistence on drinking a hill worth dying on? Was I being too rigid, too focused on what I wanted? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and for the first time, I wondered if I should just back down for the sake of peace. But every time I leaned toward giving in, something stopped me. A small, stubborn part of me whispered, "You've given enough. This isn't just about the drinking." As the trip drew closer, the tension in the group became impossible to ignore. Every interaction felt charged, even in casual conversations about logistics or plans. Nobody outright said it, but it was clear that the debate over drinking had created a rift. Eventually, it was Jake who suggested we have a final call to address everything and try to clear the air. Reluctantly, I agreed, hoping it might at least give us a chance to reset before Tahoe. The call started awkwardly, with most of the group skirting around the issue. Finally, Tom brought it up as expected. "Look, I just think it's pretty simple," he said. "We're there for Mike. If that means staying sober, that's what we should do." I took a deep breath before responding. I hear you, Tom, but this trip isn't just about one person. It's about all of us coming together, and we all bring our own lives and expectations into it. I've already offered to compromise, to stay sober for a full day and night, but I don't think it's fair to ask me or anyone else to completely set aside what we've been looking forward to. There was a long pause. Mike finally broke the silence. Guys, I appreciate how much you care, but this trip doesn't have to be perfect. Honestly, the no drinking thing, it's not a deal breaker for me. I didn't even ask for it. I just want to spend time with you all before everything in my life changes. Hearing that from Mike felt like a relief and a twist of the knife at the same time. Tom, however, wasn't convinced. "You're being too nice, Mike," he said, still trying to argue his case. But the mood had shifted. Others started chiming in, supporting the idea that everyone should enjoy the trip in their own way. The tension didn't disappear completely, but we reached a truce. No hard rules, just mutual respect. Even as the call ended, I knew the group dynamic wouldn't be the same. The resolution felt more like an uneasy stalemate than a victory, but at least the trip would go on. And that brings me here, sitting with all of this weighing on my mind. The trip is still happening, and I'm still planning to go, but things feel different now. The excitement I had at the beginning has been replaced with a mix of guilt, frustration, and uncertainty. I can't help but wonder, am I the bad guy here? Did I miss the mark by standing my ground? I wasn't trying to make this trip about me. I really wasn't. But I also felt like the expectations placed on me and on the rest of the group were unreasonable. Mike himself didn't even ask for this no drinking rule, and that's the part that sticks with me. Tom turned it into this big moral issue, something that split the group and made me question my own intentions. If Mike had come to me personally and said, "Hey, this is important to me," I probably would have handled things differently. But instead, I felt backed into a corner, like I had to choose between my own well-being and being labeled a selfish friend. And even now, I'm not sure if I made the right call. So, what do you think? Was I wrong for wanting to drink on this trip? Should I have just gone along with the no drinking rule for the sake of unity, even if it felt unfair? I honestly want to know, am I being stubborn, or was I justified in standing up for myself? At the end of the day, I care about Mike and my friends, but I also care about making the most of the few rare moments I get to step away from my responsibilities. Let me know. Am I the asshole here? Or is this just one of those situations where nobody's completely right?